Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is a brief look at the chart of Joni Mitchell. I have recently become interested in her music, primarily her first four albums. And that doesn't mean I won't listen to anything else, but those albums are highly regarded in terms of their historical place in whatever genre, if you want to call it rock music or folk music. She is right up there at the top. And actually, a few days ago, I took a long bike ride and I was listening to an album that came out 50 years ago called Blue. A lot of people who know Joni Mitchell would obviously know that. Everybody would know that. And so it came out in 1971, and I listened to the album just from beginning to end. And I'm sure that I've heard it all the way through before, but for some reason I've been really getting involved with her songs more intimately. And I said to myself, I have to find out more information about her astrologically and biographically. And I thought I had exhausted all of the avenues for finding a biography about her, but I found one from a few years ago. I think it's called Reckless Daughter. I just checked it out and I really like the writer, so I think it's going to be a good one. But in any case, I wanted to see what her astrological chart was. I knew that she was a triple water sign, sun, moon, and rising, so that wasn't any surprise. But this is just going to be, I always say it's going to be brief and then it ends up being 40 minutes. I'm going to try to make it a lot shorter than that because what I want to do is I want to go back after I've read the whole book and then maybe do a more extensive look at her chart. But this is kind of more superficial just based on the little I know. And I will start by talking about her inner planet. So her sun is in Scorpio, her moon is in Pisces. And like I said, she's like a triple water sign. Her rising sign is Cancer. Now, this is a woman who is not only an amazing composer, an amazing lyricist. I mean, the songs that I am familiar with are her earlier songs, so I don't know what she has done in the last 30 or plus years. But the songs from the late 60s and early 70s, that poetry could stand on its own. It's so good. She's an amazing lyricist, she's an amazing singer, and she's an amazing musician. So what is that, a quadruple threat? And then she's an amazing painter, and she actually painted the covers of, I know at least two of her albums, probably, I think, yeah, at least two of them. Clouds and Song of a Seagull. I think those two. I don't know about any other one. I think at least one more that I can remember. But she's just multi-talented when it comes to art. And so water signs tend to be like this, and she's a triple water sign. And if you want to include Mercury, a quadruple water sign. But in any case, the water element is highly intuitive. And art, to me, is channeling the divine. So it's not really too much of a separation between art and the spiritual. You know, when you are being creative, to me, you are channeling. You are in a meditation. So, so her Mercury is in Scorpio, her Venus is in Virgo, her Mars is in Gemini. So here she has the divine lovers, Venus and Mars, in two signs that are ruled by Mercury. So it's a mental thing. and then her rising sign is Cancer. So she is ruled by the moon. And, even though I don't know her personally, it's safe to say that she probably has a lot of kind of like a prick. Well, actually, even in the introduction, he hinted at, a rather prickly nature. So somebody with Cancer rising will tend to be hypersensitive to perceived slights. So, when we use that phrase, walking on eggshells, we should have a Cancer rising person's picture there. I was going to say in the dictionary, but that sounds like so antiquated. But the point is that Cancer is a very protective sign, but it's not only protective of other people, but of itself. So there can be this kind of feeling that, or fear of ridicule. When you have Cancer rising specifically, it's very like particular to Cancer rising, although all the inner planets and inner points will resemble one another to one degree or another. So definitely a Sun in Cancer person can exhibit this tendency, as well as a Moon in Cancer. Moon in Cancer, I think especially, because the emotions are engaged. But the reason I say with the rising sign as a defense mechanism is that this is the facade. So it's kind of the armor. And Cancer has that hard shell that it protects against the outer world that is so, insensitive, so cold, harsh, that kind of thing. In her 12th house, by the way, she has Saturn, and actually she has a conjunction between Mars and Saturn. And that's actually very good for somebody who's trying to accomplish something, because they can have especially an artist, because, you think about artists and they have a tendency to be kind of flaky. Not because, or, when I say flaky, I mean flighty, irresponsible even, and inconsistent. And this, I believe this is because they are emotional. And so emotions tend to come and go. And I think emotions can destabilize us so that we lose our resolve. And to me, Saturn and Mars can represent resolve. Saturn from this idea of wanting to manifest something, make it real in the three-dimensional world, and Mars having ambition. Now, interestingly enough, because they are a conjunction, but this is not always the case where they're in the same sign. Conjunctions aren't always in the same sign, but it's interesting that both of these planets are in Gemini, because Gemini is the writer. So even though Saturn is not an inner planet, it is making contact with Mars. So the person's ambition, in her case, because it's in Gemini, was something literary or mental, was able to be realized because, even in this mutable sign that is very changeable because it's ruled by Mercury, she was still able to kind of keep going. And I think one of the reasons why is because, being a Scorpio, she's a fixed sign, so they tend to, keep at it. And her Mercury is also in Scorpio almost to the exact same degree. And by the way, it's in the 5th house, which is the house of creativity, the house of the artist. So here we have two conjunctions. And, well, I mean, actually there's more than two, but I'm just talking about these two in particular, and both of these to me are creative houses. The 12th house is creative because it is the house of the spiritual dimensions. And that is where a lot of artists will tell you they get their inspiration. The late Dr. Wayne Dyer used to say, in spirit, inspiration is in spirit, connecting it to the spirit. So whether somebody calls it channeling or, tapping into the collective soul or the Akashic records or whatever you want to call it. There was something about that I read something, and I don't even know, gosh, I read so much stuff. And it was something about like ideas coming from the ether, and that they're already like they're in this other dimension, and then whoever happens to grab them grabs them, which is very interesting because I know that sometimes people can come up with the same thing and they haven't been able to copy it from somebody else. And it's funny because I was just listening to some song, and I said, you know what, I bet that other artist, it sounded like another song. I said, I bet they took it from that person's song. But when I thought about it, I was like, no, it's impossible because both of them came out around the same time. So it was like they were both tuning into something, and they both came out with something that had like a similar riff or something like that. So there might be some truth to that theory. But the fifth house is the house that is ruled by Leo, and its ruler, the sun, and it does, in a very overt way, connect to creativity. And when you have your sun here, and this is, like I said, that the house that is ruled by the sun, it's like art becomes the center of your existence. The sun is the center of our existence, and art becomes that for the person. And Mercury is right there, and so that can indicate that some of that artistic talent or how the person wants to express it is through the written word, but I feel like it can also be through the voice. Now, one of the things this is really funny because, like I said, I've just read the introduction to this book about Joni's life, and the writer said that he did an interview with her, and that she berated him after she read the article, because he characterized her home as, he said something about it being middle class, and she said, I live in a mansion. And it's so funny because before I even read that, I had looked at her chart. This was, about a day before I checked out the book from the library. And I noticed in her second house of earned income that she had Pluto and Jupiter and the North Node. And I thought that was odd, and I couldn't reconcile that placement with, somebody who's this ethereal type of an artist. I was thinking, Pluto in the second house can be somebody who's obsessed with wealth. And the reason, and I'm not saying that a singer or a songwriter can't be obsessed with wealth, but usually we would associate that with somebody who sells out, who writes, something came into my mind, Bernie Taupin, Elton John's lyricist, when he did that song, We Built This City for Jefferson Starship is Exhibit A, and something like that, which is like how, what came into my mind is Knee Deep in the Hoopla, which if you remember when that came out, you probably were like rolling your eyes too, like I was. But something like that, and yet can still be like an amazing artist in their own right, and still have this wonderful work to show for themselves, but then they sell out, or they get tempted by wanting to make money. Maybe they, they have something that they want to buy. Even the Beatles, I think John Lennon or Paul McCartney, they pointed to their swimming pool and said, that's, and they named a song that they had written. It's like that song had paid for their swimming pool. But, the thing is that Joni has always been very idiosyncratic. She kind of has, her songs are usually hard to sing. Because they're very irregular, they're jazzy, even when they're not straight up jazz. They have that unpredictable kind of melody, and so I don't think anybody can accuse her of selling out artistically, and yet she has this, and she got mad at that guy for not for saying that she had some kind of a middle class environment, and he was just saying, oh yeah, but it seems like earthy, it seems very like down to earth, and for some reason it offended her to be characterized that way. So Pluto in the second, Jupiter in the second, and the North Node, and the North Node is the person's, their soul's mission. And that can be a separate thing, and that can almost be, to me, just connected to how they interact with money as a whole, material resources. As a woman who was born in 1943, Joni was from an era that was a lot. That was still before feminism took hold. And so women a lot of times were getting married either out of high school, out of college, very early in their 20s. And, there were expectations for women that were still pretty rigid. So her choice of how she chose to live her life, which is kind of like any person who's an artist is, even, somebody who makes a good living recording music. They, as a woman, she would have had to stand on her own 2 feet financially, because she did get married, I believe, for a few years, and she gave a daughter up for adoption. But, and I think she actually got married in the 90s again, and was married for about 12 years. I didn't realize that, or I didn't remember it, either the 80s or the 90s, but for a stretch of time there as well. But it seems like she's spent a lot of time alone. She's had a lot of affairs with famous men, and, who knows how many unfamous, obscure men. But she seems like she's living a very solitary life these days. And so, anyway, in her 10th house of career, this is one of these other angular houses, and she has the moon at 24 degrees of Pisces. Her midheaven is 22 Pisces, so it forms a conjunction with the midheaven. Now, there again, Pisces as the midheaven, that can tell us the person's career. And it's creative. The moon is creative in Pisces, a very creative sign. And so the fact that the moon is in conjunction with this, the moon can also, talk about that audience, having that emotional connection with an audience. So whether somebody is a singer, or if they are an actor or actress, that could also work for that. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, it's just all over this chart. The sun in the 5th, the moon in the 10th. I mean, come on. And, it's interesting because to me, when you have the sun in the 5th house, even if, let's say her moon was in the 12th house or her moon was somewhere else, and she never made it, I could see her still being an artist, like that being the core identity that she has. The sun is your core identity in this incarnation, but it's going to always be an identity that is associated with this lifetime. First of all, because it's what you're born into in this life, but also because the sun is masculine. So it's kind of that outer world. It's not your ultimate identity, though. And that's the important thing, is that we never believe that who we are is dictated by what we do, that's not truly who we are. But by the same token, it's okay to hold an identity for ourselves as an artist or as a teacher, whatever it is that we do, if we really feel a strong affinity towards it. I don't see why that is a problem. Now, another interesting thing is that she has a conjunction between Venus and Neptune. And I remember reading somewhere that because of the nature of Neptune, whether you have a trine or a conjunction or a square or an opposition, the latter two are the challenging aspects. Conjunctions can be neutral, or they can go either way depending on the two planets involved. For instance, if you have a conjunction between Mars and Pluto, that's going to be a little bit on the challenging side, even though it's a conjunction and not a square or opposition. But in this case, that would also apply. All of these, even the trine, anything that we would consider more easy, an easier aspect, or a, however you want to characterize it, a positive one, something that is not challenging in the classic sense of the word. It is challenging because of the nature of Neptune. Neptune bewitches. Neptune befuddles. And the problem is that when you fall in love with someone, if you do not see them in a realistic way, if you have an idealistic notion of love itself or of a person that you are with, you may be falling in love with the wrong type of people over and over again. And, I have done many love readings, and it's not uncommon, or even just in the regular, personal readings I've done for the chart itself. And I've gotten, and I mostly do women's charts, and most of these women are involved with men, and they have a square between Venus and Neptune. And by the way, I'm not saying that almost everybody that I deal with has this. I'm just saying that it's not uncommon for me to see it, especially when I have done love readings where there are problems with that person's significant relationship. And what happens in that case is that the person tends to fall in love with people who are deceptive. These are all Neptunian traits: deceptive, addictive, mentally ill, or some other type of issue that's similar to that. And they have a hard time reconciling that because they have kind of created this alternative reality. I don't know how else to put it. And they, choose to see that person in a certain light. And this usually goes back to childhood, where they may have had a parent who was seriously flawed in some way. And an example is if you have a parent who is an alcoholic. And this is, and I think that somebody with a conjunction between Venus and Neptune can fall in love with people like this. She actually had an affair with James Taylor, and he was on heroin at the time. So that's an example. I mean, not all of her partners, I'm sure, were addicts, but I know in that case that was true. But the thing is that when you have a parent like that as a child, you can see that that parent has problems. A child can see that something's going on, but it's the nature of the child to idealize their parent. So they overlook that glaring weakness and either construct a reason why it's happening, or they kind of blot it out of their mind. I don't know how else to put it. And then they find themselves attracted to the same type of tragic figure when they, become old enough to date. So I don't know if I would say that that is true about Joni, because, but although she has a moon in Pisces and they tend to be very, there was a word I was going to use, like indiscriminate about who they fall in love with. Pisces is a sign that is not judgmental, but almost to a fault, because there's a word called discernment, which is not about judging people personally and putting them down. It's about saying, this is good for me, this is not good for me. And bringing it all back to yourself, not like dissing the other person, but saying, I don't think that being in love with an alcoholic is going to help me in my life. So I think I'm going to have to let that go. But she has, having Neptune in the fourth house, can be, and she alluded to that in some quote that she gave to the interviewer, something about, questioning the judgment of her parents. So it's possible that, we don't know exactly what was going on with them, so I don't want to speculate. But she does have Venus here, so it certainly is not someone who has like a hard scrabble life. When Venus is in the fourth house, the child has harmony to some degree. Even if there was some kind of negative circumstance, even if there was addiction within the household, which Neptune in the fourth can sometimes be, or skeletons in the closet, some kind of a situation like that, the child will usually have some relative that they can go to, and like a grandparent or something that helps them, that kind of restores their faith in life and makes their childhood still a happy one. So another thing I found interesting was that she had Chiron in the third house. And I thought, I wonder if she had a learning disability, because Chiron in the third, this can be your elementary school years. It can be your relationship with peers at that point. 11th house can also be the collective and friendships and things like that. But the third house can be, those formative years. And Chiron is an interesting thing. I'm going to have to find out more about, those years about her life. But I did read something that was really funny, is that she went to this Anglican school, and I don't really know what that is. I'm assuming it's some. I was asking my partner, and he said it was like, I think he said it was like a Protestant, because I was wondering if that was a form of Catholicism, but I guess it's not. But it was a religious school, and but she went to Sunday school one time, and she said, okay, Eve was the first woman, and Cain and Abel were the brothers, and Cain killed Abel, but then and Cain got married. So who did he marry? Eve, because she was the only woman, and she left the church after that because the Sunday school teacher treated her like crap, or she perceived it that way. So she was definitely, she must have been an intelligent child who asked a lot of questions, and of course sometimes teachers don't appreciate that if it kind of goes against their teaching. And so people, and that's so typical of somebody with Mercury and Scorpio, not to take the official story of something at face value, but to kind of dig deeper and be very maybe skeptical, investigating it at a deeper level. And so it's just very interesting. So I don't know what that Chiron represents. I'm sure I'll find out after I read more about her life. But it can simply mean that literature and maybe poetry was very healing to her, Chiron, and that she heals other people with that as well. I always wondered if singing fell into the third house. I think I heard something about that, because Mercury rules the third, and she does have her Mercury in the fifth house. So that is artistic. And Mercury, I mean, if Mercury can be communication, why not musical communication? So anyway, one thing that I want to point out, I'm going to just end this, but she has Uranus in its own house, the 11th house. Now, Joni was of the generation of Neptune and Libra. And I don't know the exact years, but it was I think the hippie generation pretty much encompassed that. She's at the early part of it, because her Neptune is only 3 degrees of Libra. So it must have gone into Neptune must have gone into Libra in 1943 or 1942 or something like that. And a lot of the artists who became part of that rock and roll generation or the folk music generation have this generational placement. Libra obviously has a connection with art, being ruled by Venus, but Neptune is this kind of, dreamy influence. And so, but it's also the love generation, right? The 60s generation is a love generation. So Neptune is about idealizing things. So idealizing art, but also love. And Uranus in the 11th house is really like enhancing that idea of the collective. And, listening to her former partner, Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills and Nash, who wrote one of the most famous songs of theirs called Our House, about his and Joni's, an experience that they had. He said that, she wrote the song Woodstock and was never there. She was supposed to be there, but she didn't actually get to perform at Woodstock. And so My feeling is that, because he was talking about that she really kind of encapsulated what it all meant to people, and she never, was there. And then they did a cover version of it that became such a famous version and was included in the movie. I mean, the documentary. So I think of Uranus in this area. Uranus is also a very intuitive influence, but having the pulse of the collective, just from that intuitive standpoint, and also the Aquarian age, the Aquarian ideals. The 11th house is very idealistic, and it's a humanitarian house, and the house of the collective. So we think of Neptune in Libra, and then we think of Uranus in the 11th house, like free love, like, hey, nobody owns somebody else. I don't know if that really is how Joni feels. She is a Scorpio after all, but she had many affairs. And she wrote a song called Cactus Tree that I think she was talking about herself, obviously, or, it seems pretty obvious to me. It doesn't seem very scorpionic, though, because Scorpio tends to be more possessive. But she has a line, while she was busy being free, and talking about, this lover, and it was about David Crosby, I believe, her relationship with him. I'm not sure, but I think it was. While she was busy being free. And that's, the freedom is associated with that 11th house and Aquarius and Uranus, nonconformity. But really, just that generational pull, wanting to be a nonconformist. And for women, being a nonconformist is not being a mother. Most women are mothers. And so even though she did get a chance to be reunited with the daughter she gave up for adoption, she wrote a song about her called Little Green, just so, I don't think I've listened to that song once without crying. But she still did her own thing without having any personal planets in Aquarius. And so anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope that you enjoyed this, and thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.